Hello and welcome to episode 471 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, welcome back. Now, when I say welcome back, I actually mean it this time because you've been away. So welcome back. How are you doing?
I'm good because as people who listened to the podcast last week will know, I had an impromptu holiday, which actually inspired a piece on the podcast this week. That's just a bit of an aside, but anybody who follows our socials, and particularly Instagram, will have seen a picture of where I was on holiday. And if you wanted to know, that was actually Corfu. First time I've been, it was lovely. So I'm nicely relaxed, having had a week off in the sun. And as ever, I was asked by every local, where am I really from? The usual thing that I get whenever I go on holiday. The only place in the world where I don't get asked if I'm from there, or people don't think I'm from there, is England. Everywhere else I go, whether it be Egypt, Spain, Greece, wherever, everybody thinks I'm a local. I probably should have been a spy. So my run of ticking every country, bar England, that people think I'm from continues, based purely on skin colour.
What I actually love, Damien, looking at you now, is you've done the typical thing that we all do when we come back from holiday, and we come back to work and we wear the whitest of white t-shirts just to show off that lovely tan. So for anyone who is listening, anyone who is listening to this, make sure you do check out the video this week because Damien has absolutely nailed it with the colour of his top that he's gone for this week.
Now, the only reason I did wear the white t-shirt is because you kept complaining that I was wearing dark colours, which didn't really work with the background. So I thought I'd go with white. It wasn't to do with my tan. But in any event, it is good to be back. It's nice to have a break. But as hard as it is to do the podcast, because people do realise a lot of work goes into it, so it is good to have a break. But I did miss it, so it's nice to be back this week. We're back on it. Before I tell you what's going to be on the show this week, Andy's going to actually read out a couple of reviews that we've had in. They are fantastic 5-star reviews. Both of these people, when we read out your reviews, if they are you, then do email in damien@moneytothemasses.com to claim your free Money to the Masses mug.
Okay, so let's start with the first one. It's from GJ_H, and it says, "This is my go-to for keeping up. This podcast ensures I'm up to date on personal finance topics and the markets. Big thanks to Damien, Andy and the team for making me stress less and save more." So if that's you, make sure that you contact us. A Money to the Masses mug will be winging its way to you. And the next one I'm going to read out, the final one, is from Tomo88. And the title of that one is Insightful and Informative. Excellent podcast, really useful information on all things money. It covers topics not only for beginners, but for those with a little more experience, which is great. Keep up the great work. Money to the Masses.
Brilliant. So as Andy said, if they are, either of those reviews belong to you, then do email me and we'll make sure you get your Money to the Masses mug. Oh, and as an aside, there won't be a podcast next week because Andy, it's his turn to spend some time with his family. Well, that sounds like I spent time with his family already. What I mean is Andy's going to have a nice break. And because Andy edits the podcast, everything collapses when he's gone. So there won't be a podcast next week, but we will obviously do one the week after. One final thing I just want to get people excited about before I tell you what's on the podcast this week. We will be shortly reaching out to our Facebook community to get a small group of people to start testing a product that we've made. So I'm not going to tell you more than that. So keep an eye on our Facebook group. If you want to be part of that, go to facebook.com/groups/Money to the Masses. And then in the next few weeks, we will put a message out in there and then you can help us and be the first to see this. So what's going to be on the podcast this week? Well, the first piece I'm going to be doing is in relation to gold, and something that we've not talked about in particular in relation to gold on the podcast before, but investing in physical gold in terms of gold coins. So something that I think a lot of people will be interested in, and there'll be one or two things in there they don't actually or might not know about investing physical gold coins. The other piece I'm going to be doing is in relation to having last minute holidays. So some things to think about and check, particularly in T's and C's. And the final piece on the podcast, Andy, you are going to be covering a reward scheme that's open to teachers.
Yeah, that's right. So the Blue Light Card is a rewards and discount scheme that's open to certain key workers, people like emergency services, the NHS, social care workers, and it's been open now to teachers. So I'm going to go through exactly what the Blue Light Card is and exactly who can now qualify for additional discounts and rewards through that scheme.
So I'm going to go straight onto the first piece of the podcast, Andy, which is in relation to investing in gold. Now, in the past, we've covered investing in gold, podcast 416, for example, which we published just over a year ago, looked at investing in gold, but focused mainly on funds, and in particular things like exchange traded commodities. So you can actually invest in gold, which is an ETC that's physically backed with gold, but you actually can therefore get exposure to the ups and downs in the price of gold. Now go back and listen to that show, because I talk a lot about gold, how much you should have in a portfolio, and also some of the drawbacks, because it is a very volatile asset. But this piece in the podcast is in relation to owning physical gold. So we're talking about things like gold bars and gold coins. Now, just recently, the Royal Mint pushed out a press release that was talking about the amount of money that had been invested in gold in the beginning part of this year, and that has been driven largely by the rally in the price of gold. So those of you who invest in gold, I invest in gold in my 50k portfolio via 80/20 Investor, but it is via one of those exchange traded commodity funds. The price of gold rallied about 13 to 14% in the first half of 2024, and that was driven partly by global uncertainties, particularly in relation to geopolitics, but also we saw lots of market volatility, and we saw more of that market volatility at the start of August. So it's all been pretty positive for the price of gold. Now, gold is a haven asset, so people tend to buy it when they're particularly fearful. So when we see markets sell off, gold tends to rally, and the opposite is true. When people are very enthusiastic and optimistic and they're buying stocks, for example, gold may not perform particularly well. And people think that gold is an inflation hedge. That doesn't always stand up when you look at the statistics. It is a very volatile asset, so the price does go up and down a lot. So you have to bear that in mind when you're investing in it. But some people do like to invest in it as a store of value. Now, one of the things that people may not be aware of is that you can invest in physical gold via the Royal Mint. But typically what would happen is you would invest based upon weight. So you may buy gold bars, or you can actually buy gold coins. But it is possible to buy fractional coins as well, which is one of the things I want to focus on a little bit more in this podcast. Now, a lot of people might not understand what that means, but a gold coin is typically sold as an ounce. Anything in a smaller denomination in terms of size is considered a fractional coin. So what that does is it actually opens up investing in gold to a wider selection of the population. So it means that you can invest in physical gold coins in slightly smaller amounts. So a 1/10 of an ounce gold bullion coin I'm looking at the moment on screen, you can buy for £243. Now that obviously opens up the idea of investing in physical gold. The one thing that a lot of people might not realise, that if you invest in physical gold coins, they are technically legal tender, and that means they are exempt from capital gains tax. Now, in a year where the capital gains tax allowance has been slashed and it's now only £3,000, that has added to the attraction of investing in physical gold coins. So the demand from the haven perspective has been added to people who are also trying to protect their money from capital gains tax. But of course, you do have the volatility of the gold price to contend with as well. Now, another thing I think people might not understand about bullion coins is that there is a premium on the fractional coin. So I'm going to give you an example so it's easier to understand. You can get a 1/10 ounce gold bullion coin for about £243 as I'm looking at the screen at the moment. There's lots of different coins you can buy, but that's an example. Now, a full 1 ounce bullion coin, there was one for £1,963. Now you can do the maths there. If you times £243 by 10, it's a lot more than the £1,963 for the 1 ounce coin. Now that premium exists partly because of the expense of making those smaller coins, because obviously normally they would only make the 1 ounce coin. So that is part of it. And there is that sort of supply and demand element in there as well. So you have to factor that in to the equation when you're thinking about potential gains in the future, that there is a premium on the smaller coins. Another thing you've got to think about is storage of your gold. So you can take physical delivery of it, and actually it's free to have it sent out to you, but you're going to have to store it securely at home. That may mean you're going to have to install a safe of some kind at home, and of course you're going to have to insure it as well. The other thing you can do is you could actually just store it at the Royal Mint. Now the cost does depend upon the type of gold that you have. So single coins, for example, are priced differently than if you have a coin tubes or bars, and that's excluding 1 gram, 5 gram and 10 gram gold bars, so the smaller ones. Now for those type coin tubes and the larger bars, you're looking at about a 1% flat annual rate. So if the total value of the metal that you hold is £10,000, then the amount that you're going to pay per quarter, including VAT, is £30. So that flat rate obviously applied to the value. The more money you have or more gold you have, the higher the amount you pay. For single coins and the smaller gold bars, then it's 2%. So you could be looking at the £10,000 example I just gave. If you had a coin and the value of the coin or the bar was £10,000, you're looking at a rate quarterly of £60, including VAT. Now there is another product that people may not have heard of that the Royal Mint offers, which is called DigiGold. Now this is a much more modern version of investing in gold, and what it means is you can invest in gold via monetary amounts. With the normal physical purchase of gold coins and bars you buy based on the weight, this is based upon the monetary amount you want to invest. So you can invest as little as £25, and what that means is that your investment is backed by physical gold bars, coins, whatever, that is stored at the Royal Mint. The fees are 0.5% plus VAT, and there are some small fees for buying and selling. I'm not going to go into all of the details. We'll put links to the DigiGold part of the Royal Mint website. If people are interested, they can go and find out for themselves. But what we're really doing is pointing out that this exists. So to finish off this piece, it is interesting. A lot of people won't be aware about fractional coins and CGT exemptions, for example, but I must highlight some of the pros and cons of investing in physical gold. Well, I mean, one of the cons straight away is the volatile nature of the asset. There is, of course, the fact you might not get back the money that you have invested because of that. The price of gold does go up and down. I mean, the other thing is that there are storage costs, as I've mentioned. There will be insurance costs as well. And there is a potential issue if you want to sell your asset, that you've got to find a buyer. Now, when it comes to the pros, of course, one of the pros is that it potentially can be a store of value. So you actually have a physical thing that you've purchased. And one of the other things is there's no counterparty risk. Now, counterparty risk is prevalent in financial instruments that replicate things like the price of gold. So if that counterparty, for example, goes bust, then the return that came or should have come from that financial instrument that was meant to be giving you a return that tracked the price of gold, then that can fall apart and not be no longer exist. So that can be an issue. That's called counterparty risk, and it's something that people overlook. Obviously, if you own a physical asset, you don't have that problem. So we'll put links in the show notes to the Royal Mint website. People can go and read a lot more around it. There's some really interesting stuff on there. But Andy, owning physical gold, I think it's something that a lot of people will be quite interested in, and it's not something that we're necessarily recommending, but it's definitely something I think some people will go and research after they've listened to the podcast.
Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. So, as you say, we'll put links to that in the show notes, Damien. So, moving on to the next piece then, we're going to be looking at the T's and C's that exist when you're booking holidays at short notice. Now, a lot of what you're going to go through are just general tips on what you should look out for when you're booking a holiday anyway. But there are some specific things that if you're thinking of a last minute, what we're in now, we're at 15th of August. There's going to be some listeners that are looking to bag a bargain towards the end of August and quickly get a holiday in before the kids go back to school. So Damien, T's and C's on a last minute holiday.
Yeah, as you say, some of these things are generic tips, but there are things to look out for when you're potentially booking. I mean, it is easy to get wrapped up in the excitement of finding a great deal and therefore booking it straight away. I'm going to run through these fairly quickly. Some of this is from experience as well of my recent trip. Now, one of the things I want to point out is that when you're booking a trip, you need to check when you need to pay, whether it's upfront or installments. And also that for most people, it will be in sterling they'll be paying, but if not, then what currency have they got to pay in, and if there's any conversion fees that are going on. So last minute deals may mean that people are trying to buy things in slightly different ways or from places they're not normally used to. Always check that a deal isn't too good to be true and you're buying from a reputable, or I struggle to say that word, business, someone that you've used before. And one of the other things that you often see are the things that are tried to be that are bundled into these holidays, and that is typically the case with insurance. A lot of the packages you'll see will try to include insurances. Now, they're quite pushy with some of the insurance products they try to sell you. Do have a look at what they are. Look for the details of the coverage, such as trip cancellation, medical emergencies, baggage protection, and make sure you understand the limits and the exclusions of them. And I would always personally shop around anyway, particularly if you're like me and you have a pre-existing medical condition. You could probably get a better deal elsewhere. So do look around. The other thing to bear in mind is that you may be booking a last minute deal, and it may be a good deal because there are quite a few people that aren't wanting to travel there, and you may want to work out why that is. I'll give you a good example. It could be because there are wildfires going on, so that may be something that people aren't wanting to go to a country for. It may be just because it's relatively close by. Do make sure that you check for things like liability for natural disasters. And we've just done an article on the Money to the Masses website about wildfires and travel insurance. We'll put a link in the show notes. So do think about the things that could potentially cause you not to be able to go on holiday, even though it's a last minute deal that you've booked, and make sure that your insurance does cover those things.
Yeah, and another thing on that, Damien, I would check whether you can make changes or modifications to your holiday, because often when you're booking last minute, there might be certain restrictions on what you're allowed to do. Now, in some circumstances, even just changing things like a passenger name will either be not allowed or it might incur a huge fee. So double check what you can change on your policy, ensure there is added flexibility in there and what the potential charges might be.
Yeah, and the other thing to possibly check is the accommodation details, such as check-in and check-out times, additional fees. Now, this was one that nearly caught me, actually, on our holiday. It was last minute. The local taxes. Now, there have been new taxes introduced in a range of countries, particularly in Europe recently, and we went to Corfu, as I mentioned, and there's a lot written online about the potential taxes that you would have to pay when you went there, and the details were a little bit sketchy, and it was in relation to the number of people who were on holiday. There was potentially in relation to the quality of the accommodation. So we're talking about the sort of star rating of where you were staying, so much so that it meant that the potential additional cost of that caused by the local taxes was actually could have been significant. So do make sure that you check about the taxation, because it could be the last minute deal has come up because the people aren't willing to actually pay the taxes.
On that, Damien, when you're talking about local taxes, don't make the mistake that I made when I was young and booking my first holiday. When I saw the words, and this is honestly true, when I saw the words includes all local taxes, I genuinely thought I had a free taxi service to go around town. I was young and inexperienced. It was my first holiday abroad. But I remember getting there and telling my friends, this is amazing. We don't even have to pay for the taxes. That's a true story.
But as soon as you started that, I could see where that was going. That is brilliant. Other things, yeah, of course, check baggage allowances, seat allocation fees, any other policies that might affect your sort of travel experience. So these are all things that you might not look at in the T's and C's, and you get overexcited because they're trying to shift the holiday and you don't realise actually the ultimate cost you end up paying could be significantly different. Other things to bear in mind, look to see, and this isn't like a negative or anything, this is just look to see if you can do twilight check-in on your holiday. Now, we did this on our recent holiday because we had flights that were really early, so that was one of the reasons it was a good deal. But we were able to check in our luggage the night before and then stay over in a hotel. And so don't just assume that the cost of getting a taxi or to the hotel, or you might normally drive and park, is going to be the cheapest way. Do have a look at any deals that are out there that may be hotels that include parking, for example, the various different options to make sure you find out which is cheapest. Because for us, it ended up being that we stayed the night before in a hotel and got parking, and were able to check in the night before and actually save quite a bit of money. So do have a look at that. Don't fall foul of booking a cheap flight, which I'm going to call out. This actually happened to Justin, who got a cheap holiday, thought it was fantastic. Then when he went home, him and his now wife were sitting there wondering, well, everyone else is sort of still here. We got brilliant flight times, and everyone was wondering how they got such great flight times in their hotel. And when they realised when they got to the hotel, the airport, that they'd actually flown out the Gatwick airport and they were returning to Heathrow because they'd picked their flights and actually messed up. So small details. So anybody who's not from the south of England, that is a long distance between those two airports. It might say London, but there's a long distance. So they went to two different airports, and that obviously is the sort of thing that some people might do. Do always check the T's and C's. That's a bit of an extreme example, but it does happen.
Yeah, and just another couple of quick tips from me, Damien. I'm someone now who likes to plan. I'm a real planner before I go away. And obviously, if you're going last minute, you don't necessarily have that same amount of planning time. But one area where you should make the time is making sure that you make a list of people who you might need to contact if something goes wrong. So make sure you get a contact name, a phone number is brilliant, an email address. Maybe even test that phone number and email address out before you go to make sure that it doesn't just ring and ring and ring, or that no one responds to the email. Check the opening hours, and also don't forget to note where they're based, so you can factor in sort of time difference if you need to when contacting them. Another thing to check is liability and disclaimers. It's quite important to understand exactly how your holiday booking works and who is liable for what part of the holiday. So obviously there are companies that sell you the holidays. There are obviously also holiday providers. So try to understand exactly who is responsible if something goes wrong and to what extent. So some of the liability could be down to the booking company, the booking platform where you booked, whereas the holiday provider may shoulder additional responsibilities when it comes to travel disruptions or maybe poor quality amenities. So just get it right in your head exactly who you need to contact if something goes wrong, and you should be well prepared then for when you go away.
Yeah, and the final one I think I'm going to throw in there is, do check the T's and C's on your car hire if you've got one included, so you know where it is, the terms of it, when you give the car back, exactly what you're going to get as well. Because sometimes I think there's been many stories where you turn up to somewhere and you're not actually getting the deal that you think you are, and then when you look at the T's and C's, you actually understand that it was never actually what you thought it actually was going to be. So make sure it's the right size car that you want, all of those things. And when you do go there, do also make sure when you're checking the car out that you take a video of the whole car inside and out, and loads of photos, because that can help you in the event of a dispute about any damage to the car. And I mean, just to give you a prime example, fortunately I did that because in my holiday which come back from, the car rental company did try to keep a part of the deposit that they had taken for scratches to the car, but they already actually existed because I had evidence that they did. And in fairness to them, they were also quite upfront about encouraging people to take photos and a video of the car before they drove it away. And the other thing to bear in mind is that do check whether the car hire, the terms of what's going to be expected of you in terms of the deposit, so you know before you go there, and that you've got the money available on a credit card. Normally what happens is you obviously put a holding deposit on a credit card. Make sure you know what that is, and when you go there, don't be pressured into buying insurances. You can buy insurances while you're at home, so for any damage. There is an article on the Money to Masses website which I will link to, which enables you to compare different products, but you can buy a car insurance policy, so it basically pays out if there is any damage to the car, rather than you having to buy the car hire company's expensive one, which they try and sell you over the counter, and it will be up to sort of half the price. I mean, to give you an example, I had one recently when I went away, and I only had to pay £30 for the entire week, compared to something like 3 times that if I'd taken out the policy from the car hire company.
Okay, so let's move on to the final piece of the podcast then. And it is a super quick piece because we're going to be talking about the blue light card, because as of last week, teachers can now get access to that discount and reward scheme that many key workers have already been able to access and been benefiting from. So let's have a quick look at exactly what kind of discounts are available on the blue light card. There's some examples here, and we put an article on the Money to the Masses website, which we'll put a link to in the show notes. Ultimately, if there's any sort of service out there, always check to see whether you can get a discount through the blue light card if you are eligible. So there are discounts for food, and I'll read off a few here. Beefeater, Brewers Fayre, they are all offering 25% off all food. Hungry Horse and Green King are offering 15% off food. Now, it might not sound a lot, but if you're going out as a family and you're getting 25% off the entire bill, now it does say food there, so it might not necessarily be drinks, but that is a significant saving that you'll make every time you eat out. Looking at a couple of the others, we've got travel, fashion, sports and fitness. I'll just pick off a couple here. Jet2 holidays, you can save £60 per person on a holiday when you book with them. Fashion, there's 20% off full price Levi's. And if we look in the sports and fitness area, Garmin products, you can get up to 40% off products, and Pure Gym, you can get 10% off membership. So there's a wide range of discounts and rewards available through the blue light card. As I say, it's already a membership scheme that's been in place, and there are hundreds of thousands of people that are able to benefit from this reward scheme. But the news is that teachers, teaching assistants, head teachers, essentially anyone that works in a state school can get access to these benefits. So not all teachers are now eligible for the blue light card. For example, higher education staff are not currently eligible. And reading through the notes, it doesn't seem to me, I can't find evidence that private school teachers are currently eligible. Now, have a look for yourself if you work in private education. It may be the case, but the site isn't explicitly clear on whether private school teachers and staff are eligible at the moment. But state early years and primary school teachers and people who work in those schools are eligible. Secondary school and sixth form colleges, state secondary school that is, and special schools, vocational schools and referral units are all eligible to apply for a card. Now, the application process is fairly straightforward. There is a little bit of a backlog of applications within the system. This kind of broke the internet when this was announced last week, so you may need to be patient. And so there is a small cost for the blue light card. It is $4.99 when you apply, but that does cover you for 2 years. And to be honest, if you're going to be using that card semi-regularly, you'll be making that back probably in the first month.
So for completeness, what are the other professions, or some of the other professions, that the teachers are now joining in being able to use this particular scheme?
Yeah, so it's the ambulance service, community first responders, the fire service, armed forces, the NHS, including NHS dental practice workers, the reserved armed forces, the Red Cross, St John's Ambulance, and now obviously teachers, teaching assistants and head teachers.
So we'll put a link in the notes of the podcast to an article that explains all of this in full, including a full list of the different professions that can apply for one of these cards. So Andy, I think that's it. I think we're done for this week. Just let me do the usual admin. Please do make sure that you follow us on all our socials. As I mentioned, join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/money to the masses. There's going to be an exciting announcement on there in the coming weeks. We're going to need some people to help test a new product for us. So please do join that group, and we're going to put something out there in a few weeks' time. As ever, do leave a review. As you heard at the start of the podcast, there's always the potential that you could win one of the coveted Money to the Masses mugs. I've obviously just come back from holiday, so I'm in a very generous mood when it comes to giving away mugs, so do make sure you go on there and leave a review. So Andy, I think I've covered pretty much everything, so all that's left for us to do is to say, well, until next time.
Until next time.